All right, everybody. Stamp of approval, episode 10. We finally made it here. I did skip Valentine's week because, I do have a significant other, so I didn't feel that recording a podcast episode would be the coolest thing to do. But we're here. We're back. Episode 10. We do have some other guests coming in the future, too. So this will not be, a big string of solo episodes. I do hope to have a guest on very soon. Now, I have a lot of topics that I want to get through tonight. Some of them gaming related and some of them can just kind of real life related and things that I've kind of been mulling over the past few weeks. So I definitely want to kind of get through those in a timely manner. I always say this, I'm not in the business of wasting anybody's time. And I don't think anybody on Twitch should be in the business of wasting anybody's time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just get into it. Now, this is something that I have meant to bring up with at least one of my guests, but inevitably, once we get talking and the chat starts going, the conversation gets steered into a more organic direction, and we usually don't end up covering all the topics that I have preset, and that's fine. But the first thing I wanted to talk about, because again, this has been kind of a consistent theme in my life ever since my dad originally sat me down when I was maybe 13 and told me this. He told me back then that your coworkers are not your friends. And there's a difference between coworkers, friends, and acquaintances. There's a big categorization difference between all three. And understanding that separation and being able to separate those three types of people is actually really, really crucial for you to succeed and also to know what you should and should not say around those people. The most Scuffed podcast? Well, see, that's self-explanatory, though, Adipie. I shouldn't have to say that because everyone already knows it. Everybody already knows this is the most Scuffed podcast in the world. Maybe someday we'll have the production quality of some larger ones, but anyways. Yeah, so, when it really comes down to it, the way that a lot, especially if you're working in the corporate world or you're in a corporate environment, coworkers, so picture this scenario, you've got your feet to the fire over something, you're kind of in some hot water over it. Your boss is needing you to prove that you've either been doing something or that you're being as productive as you say you are, and for whatever reason, you can't produce the evidence, but you know that a coworker could back you up. I'm just telling you based on my own experience. No, things haven't been dicey at work, but this is just, general life experience stuff. I'm just telling you from my personal experience, 9 times out of 10, those coworkers will not back you up because they don't also want to be in hot water alongside you. The way that a lot of work environments are structured and the way that especially corporate and retail and these industries where you kind of start on the lower rung of the ladder and climb your way up one at a time, it really is very competitive, and a lot of it comes down to winning against other coworkers. So if you notice that another coworker is they've got they're at neck level underwater, most of the time in the corporate world, it's sadly more beneficial for you to just let them be there and just pretend like you don't know what they're talking about and that you're being productive and you have no clue what they have going on. And in my personal experience, like I said, that's kind of how people have treated it. I had a situation in an IT position several years ago for a university where we were supposed to process these tickets in the morning. There would be emails that would come in overnight from various different departments, and we were supposed to sort of compartmentalize and make tickets, work orders to process these things. And we each had a folder on kind of a shared network drive for our process tickets and, where we had created them. And for whatever reason, I never was given a folder and I didn't have the permissions to make one. So I was using other people's folders. But where I made the mistake is I didn't put my name on it and I didn't indicate in any way that it was me doing it. Now, all my coworkers knew that I was doing this. And nobody ever had an issue with it. But then one day, I guess one of my bosses got curious and he was just kind of browsing through the folder and he's like, wait, why doesn't real name have a folder? So he comes over and comes into my office and he's like, have you not been processing emails in the morning all this time? And I was like, oh no, I have. I've been putting them in other people's folders because I didn't get a folder and I just hadn't asked about getting one yet. Well, he goes and asks the 2 girls and a guy whose folders I've been using, and they say they have no idea what I'm talking about, despite us having many conversations about this. So, you know what I mean? It's like, and I didn't consider them friends, but I did at least think that they would do me a solid and be like, oh yeah, he's been putting stuff in my folder, but they didn't want to they didn't want to take the heat for it, I guess. So they just kind of threw me under the bus. And I actually ended up getting written up about it. But it's like, I didn't really take it personally because, I've been thinking a lot about this here lately. Trying my best to not make decisions based on my emotions, and really try to be more in this logical space and be more emotionally mature about the decisions that I make and the company that I keep. So, whereas when I was younger, I would get really mad about it and like call people out and message people some really snide passive aggressive shit. Like when I was maybe 18 or 19, I would do that. Nowadays, it's like, whatever, I'm just going to chalk it up as a loss and move on. And experiences like that really teach you that it is incredibly important to be independent in the workforce, to the best of your ability. Like, yeah, it's important to maintain good relationships with your supervisors, but it's not the most important thing in the world to maintain good relationships with coworkers. And I don't mean that in the sense of, oh, you should just be a lone wolf and ignore your coworkers and focus strictly on yourself. No, it's still very productive to be helpful to your coworkers, but you just don't have to extend that into any sort of friendship or, discussing interests in life outside of work, unless there's like a team building exercise or something that warrants it. You don't really need to get into all that, and it's actually more beneficial if you don't. Because there's less distractions, less to even discuss really, and more time for you to focus on your own performance and your own growth within any particular industry or company. So, to that end, also, I see this all the time where people are like, oh, this is my work wife, or, oh, this is my work BFF, and this, that, and the other. That's fine. Just as long as you know that there needs to inherently be a separation, that can work. I've seen situations where people are just like attached at the hip and they get a lot of work done and they're really productive. They work well together, but it's usually people that are in a leadership role. It's usually if one particular team has two supervisors that just so happen to work together really well, that's usually where that can work more than anything else. And it's because work husbands/wives are gross, but that's a different story. It's just a weird term. I feel like it's an uncomfortable term. I don't know. It just feels awkward anytime I see somebody legit use that and not be joking about it. But anyways. So yeah, that's just basically what it comes down to. Your coworkers are not your friends. And my mom's dealt with this many times where, they were basically going to formally file a complaint because of work conditions. She thought that this coworker would have her back, and then when it came down to it and the chips were down, the other coworker was just too quiet and freaked out to say anything because she didn't want to lose her job. So, it happens in every industry all over the place. Unfortunately, the way that the workforce is structured, specifically in the US, but I would say most Western workforces, is you're replaceable. And this is the mentality that's kind of handed down from the top. Not in all companies. Thankfully, I work in a company now where this is not the case. But in a lot of industries and a lot of companies, you're replaceable. And if you don't like the way things work, get up out of here and we can replace you in 48 hours. And that's just generally how it goes. What's up, She? And this is why we stay jobless. Woohoo. Honestly, something that I really love is the growth of remote work. My company is a good example, but there's a lot of others out there that were actually prepared for the pandemic in a lot of ways. They basically said, look, we're just going to order a ton of monitors, a ton of docks, like docking stations for laptops. What's up, Medicine Man? And we're going to send everybody home, and everybody grab 2 laptops, the cables you need, this, that, and the other, and just go home, fine. And we'll figure the rest out from there. And they actually even stopped renting out the office space because they noticed that just basically nobody was in there. And so they thought, what's the point of us spending $10,000 to $15,000 a month to rent out this floor of office space if nobody's going to use it? So a lot of companies learned that this work that they previously just doubled down on and refused to let people do from home is actually fairly possible from home. So, there may not be a lot of positives. Am I evil for wanting another lockdown? I wouldn't use the word wanting a lockdown. I would say that quarantine was me in my own element, though, in a selfish way. Obviously, I don't want people to get sick. I don't want people to be, paranoid and masking up and being afraid of getting sick and not being able to visit family. That's really miserable and sad. But quarantine was me in my element. I will say that, because it was basically, oh, hey, it's the lifestyle I'm already living. So, whenever quarantine hit and everybody was talking about, oh my God, it's so boring to be at home and this, that, and the other. I was like, what's the problem? Anyways, yeah, exactly. Lockdown, not outbreak. I don't like the sickness aspect of it, but the quarantine aspect of it, I didn't have a problem with, really. Exactly, Adipai, yeah. I was already doing it, so what's the difference? But yeah, so, it's just I think it's just a mentality thing, and it's really a perspective thing as well. Just making sure that you're not treating a coworker as if they're your best friend. If they're strictly your coworker, you don't see them outside of work, you don't talk to them outside of work. I know we want to trust people. I think a lot of people are very naturally trusting, but you have to keep people at arm's length, because admittedly, you cannot trust anybody. You don't know for sure what their motives are, and it could very well be a situation where you're telling them these personal things about your life, and instead of them, taking that information and using it in a productive way, they could very well be creating this stockpile of things to dump. If you're ever trying to get ahead or you're trying to get a higher up position, they could just be creating this stockpile of things to leak to your managers, to put on social media. You just don't know. You never know. I love being at home, especially because I was living with my mom. Yeah. Quarantine did lead to a spike in divorces, so rip to those couples. Yeah. Yeah, I heard that. Like, a lot of people were, quarantined in their apartments together, and they were just spending too much time together and arguing and this, that, and the other. So that sucks, but it definitely happened. So, and it kind of comes back to what I've talked about in the past again, which is you have to hold everybody to the same standards and not be too trusting, because the one time you're a little bit too trusting with a coworker, you guys get into a deep conversation, especially if it's via, a chat program like Microsoft Teams or Zoom or anything that lets you actually type a chat and have it. Listen, all conversations had at work need to be from the perspective that if anybody wants to read this whole transcript, they could at any point. When you're in IT, especially when you're on a VPN for a company, there is someone at that company that can pull that chat log and read every single thing that's being typed. So be very, very careful what you put in the chat. Now, not saying that ever really happens, and in fact, most of the time it's like a legal situation where they have to get permission to pull logs first. But I'm just saying, it's something that you should keep in mind just to cover your own ass. CYA is a very important policy when you're in the corporate world, and really any industry, I would say. And plus, there's a difference between, when I was younger, I would definitely categorize myself as a people pleaser. If someone dared me to do something, I would just do it because I wanted to make people laugh, or I thought that it would be hilarious if I just did it, because I had that class clown mentality. But then as I got older, I realized that people really tried to push that really far and tried to get me to do shit that I didn't want to do. So there's a difference between being a people pleaser and a doormat and being independent and helpful at the same time. You can be independent, and the most important thing I learned was just to tell people no. A lot of times when I was younger, I just had this inherent fear of telling people no, because I was like, I want to be the person that always tells people yes. And, because I figured, I would be the exception to the rule in that case. Because if you're talking to your friends and they always disappoint you and tell you no about stuff, it's like, I want to be the one person that always says yes and does the cool shit. Yeah, don't be that. There's a reason why everybody else says no. And it really just comes down to, as soon as someone understands that you're a yes man or someone that'll always say yes to things, inevitably somebody's going to start taking advantage of you. So that's why it's important to keep that, keep the no card. The no card is super, super important. That makes sense. Welcome to the club. And, I've said this before as well, maybe not necessarily on a podcast episode, but you can be honest with people, not in a degrading way, but I've always held the mentality that the truth is a gift, whether people like to hear it or not. So, I've talked about situations in the past with my family or otherwise where I've told people the brutally honest truth. And I'm okay with if people tell me the honest truth as well. If you think my show sucks, if you think my stream sucks, if you think the eyeliner's cringe, the way I dress is cringe or look or act or anything, that's fine. It doesn't mean I'm going to change it, but it's fine. I'm okay with criticism, and trust me, I've gotten a lot of criticism over the years. Capricorn vibes AF. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I've told people things, they've asked me for feedback, and I'm like, well, if you really want to know, I think this is bad. And they didn't take it very well, but it's like, hey, somebody had to say it, because if I didn't say it, you'd go into a situation being deluded and you would honestly look ridiculous. So it's not in a sense of I want to make you look bad or I want to insult you. It's I want to tell you from the perspective of someone outside of your realm or your industry or your profession, your hobby, whatever it is, how this looks, so that you are equipped with that information if you're going to do anything as far as a professional venture. You're going to try to move up a ladder in any particular industry. You need to get that feedback. God knows if I got no feedback from anybody, this show and this stream would be way, way different than it is. So feedback is extremely important, and I can't stand, I'm going to tell this story, but I'm not going to name any names, but people in here probably know who I'm talking about. I went to another streamer's, stream one time, and you guys know I'm obsessed with audio. Obsessed. Like I am obsessed with every setting, configuration, placement, everything that has to do with mics and headphones, okay? And this person had some kind of, I don't know if it was a setting or a lack of a setting, but when they made their S sounds with their voice, it was like an ice pick went inside my ear. And it didn't matter what headphones I was wearing. It wasn't me. You know, like the Shaggy song, it wasn't me. And I go into their stream and I sent one of their mods a very respectful message. I was like, hey, I'm just letting you know that this is happening, and you can actually use this thing called a de-esser. It'll fix it in like 2 seconds. It's super easy to put it onto OBS. It'll take maybe 15 seconds. That's it. And the mod was like, okay, you can go ahead and ask the streamer that, because, you know, it's going to be a really easy thing. So I just put it in the chat. I was like, hey, just letting you know, dude, you can download this de-esser. It'll fix that right up, like no problems anymore. It takes literally 10 seconds to add that filter into OBS. And he gets offended. Like, he got pissed off at me. He's like, yeah, I've never had anybody else sit in my chat and bitch about my audio. So I think my audio is just fine. But thanks for the suggestion. He's like, I don't need audio tips from chat. I think I'm good. Like, what? Bro, where's the pride? Why are you so prideful about this? Come on now. I just don't understand that mentality. Like, if you have the mentality that your shit is perfect the way it is, you're never going to feel the need to improve. And yeah, there are situations where people are just fucking prodigies and they're told by everyone around them that what they're doing is the right thing. But I just can't wrap my head around why you would want to hurt your viewers' ears every time you make an S sound. Like, there's literally a filter, there's a plugin, there's an audio adjustment on virtually every piece of hardware and software called a de-esser for a reason. That's why that exists. Death by S. I literally can't watch their stream because it's so harsh. And I maybe it is just me. Maybe I am just, but again, I don't talk about other streamers in a negative light here. I'll describe scenarios, but I'm not going to drop any names ever, because that's just, I feel like that's really tacky and it's not really how I want to be. So it doesn't matter who I'm talking about. I will never drop a name. I leave things vague, and that's not really the type of stream I want to be. But anyways, I felt like that was a more than respectful piece of feedback. Maybe his earpiece, it's possible. Yeah. Like, maybe his headset mutes it, but I tried AirPods. I tried every pair of headphones I own, and I own like 4 different varieties, and it was bad on all of them, dude. So I don't think it was just me. I just think other people hadn't mentioned it yet. Anyways, so that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. Like, it's just important. Take people's feedback. Don't take it as gospel, but take it as a contribution to what you're trying to do. If you have never really considered an angle of feedback, or maybe you've never really considered something that someone's told you in terms of feedback, definitely consider it. You don't have to make change every time you're given constructive criticism, but try to augment what you're doing just a little bit to align with what they tell you. Like, perfect example is people used to tell me my shit was way too quiet. They're like, when I go to other streams, I can leave my volume at 100% and I can hear everything perfectly fine. But when I go to your stream, it's tough to hear. Like, and I noticed, I was like, oh shit, you're right. Like, for some reason, my shit was just super quiet. So I figured it out and I fixed it. Like, imagine if I just folded my arms and said, yeah, sorry, I don't need audio suggestions from chat. I've done the research, I've done the work, and I think my shit's perfect. So appreciate the suggestion, but fuck out of here. You know what I mean? It's like, why? What's the purpose of doing that and just alienating people? Honestly, most people today are way too fragile, so I often have to tread carefully around people. 100%. That's the truest thing about people in general. Like, and I feel like maybe it comes from the isolation that we were talking about earlier from quarantine. There are literally people now, and this is not surprising, this was the case about 10 years ago, who have never, ever had a real job in terms of, going out into the workforce and having a team and communicating with other people on the regular and gaining these social skills organically. There are people who never did that, and they just immediately became like a partnered streamer on Twitch, and that's been their job for a very long time. And so because they've never gone out into the workforce and experienced what that world is like and gained those social skills organically, they just think they know best. And they're very fragile about criticism because they think they know best, and they can't like navigate the criticism. You know what I mean? When you go out into the workforce, especially, and you become acquainted with the fact that people are going to shit talk you, yes, growing a backbone, thick skin, it's often called, or growing a backbone, people are going to shit talk you, people are going to spread rumors about you. And the quicker you become comfortable with that, and the quicker you are able to navigate in that situation, that's going to benefit you in all areas of life. So, the way that I handle criticism on the stream and the weird fucking threatening DMs that I get like very frequently, and I don't think it's just me. I've talked to a bunch of other streamers that are roughly my size, and they all say they get weird DMs like that too. It's like people threaten me and then they put like a Bitcoin address as if I'm going to give them fucking money to not do, I don't know. Anyways, most of the ones I've reported against have been banned, but I'm just saying. There isn't a concept of someone knowing better and trying to help you. Yeah, it's always, those types of people always view criticism as you're trying to tear down what I'm doing, or you think there's something wrong with what I'm doing. No, absolutely not. I just think that what you're doing is great, but it could be better. And if someone is an expert in a particular field, like I'm not an expert on cameras. If somebody came in here and told me my camera settings were shit, I'd take what they had to say and I would listen to it, because I'm not an expert. I don't know nearly as much about cameras as I know about audio. I'm not a professional in either. I've just done a lot of research in one versus the other. So, accepting criticism is fine. It doesn't mean you have to change everything based on the feedback, but I think accepting criticism and being comfortable with the constructive ones is definitely a way to improve your content overall. Threatening that's what I was saying the other day. It's like a rite of passage. It starts out with threatening DMs. Later on, it starts out with people trying to dox you, and then it just goes on from there. It's the natural progression of being a content creator. Isn't that fun? It's so fun. With that being said, I want to shift into some of the more gaming-centric topics I wanted to discuss today. So for that, we have a beautiful new logo. Look at that. So now with our official Stampede seal of quality, not approval, it's the seal of quality, we're going to talk about some interesting gaming-related stuff that I've been holding off on because, the conversations with the guest, I want to make sure they're more about the guest and putting them on a platform, and so we get to know them. But you guys know I got to geek the fuck out sometimes, so it's time to talk about some gaming stuff. So first thing I wanted to talk about is, what do you guys think? Just quick question. If I were to ask you, what do you think the most influential modern horror game is? And when I say modern, I mean like since maybe the year 2005. What do you think the most influential modern horror game is? Maybe even going back to 2000. It's just right off the top of your head, if you had to say it, what would be the most influential? In terms of people playing it, other games trying to copy it. And the Nintendo Ninjas. Yeah, I'm going to receive a cease and desist from official Nintendo channel on Twitch. Luigi's Mansion, RE4. So it's actually Amnesia: The Dark Descent. And the reason why I say that is because Amnesia: The Dark Descent created an entire genre of horror games that is still ongoing to this day, which is the walking simulator / hide and seek type of horror game. Amnesia introduced a new style of horror game that was not about weapons. It was not about, finding shotgun shells and grenades and pistol ammo and stuff like this. It's about just hiding. You can't fight enemies. There's a light and a sanity meter, and you just have to run away and hide from enemies. And it started a whole genre on YouTube of horror Let's Players that were really founded by people like PewDiePie, Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, and a lot of others. Of, this picture-in-picture shot of someone's camera in the corner of the screen where you can see their live reaction of being scared by the game. That kicked off that was like a cannon shot that went off that started a race that nobody even knew they were in, of like, whoa, this is the new thing to do on YouTube, around like 2011 or so. I think the game actually came out in 2010, but those types of videos weren't around until 2011. And that game is so influential that even games to this day are still coming out that are based on some of the mechanics that it introduced, like a light and a dark mechanic, where when you're in the dark, you're slowly losing sanity and things get weirder and weirder. Visage did that. And Visage came out in 2019, 2020? Like, that's a very new game, all things considered. Yeah. Now, admittedly, a lot of their reactions were fake and bullshit, but what's not fake and bullshit on YouTube? Come on now. And you could even say PT, RE7, and Alien Isolation are some really modern examples of that type of gameplay too, because RE7, before you get your pistol and before you even get your knife, it has a little bit of that hide and seek with Jack at the beginning. Watching PewDiePie scream his lungs out on some 360p is a nice childhood memory. The first game I ever watched him play was actually Slender, which was a really kind of thrown together. Apparently the guy that developed it in Unity did it on a coffee break. And it's also, hey, what's up, John? Yeah, you like this new logo? I got the hex code for the color and the font matches and everything, dude. Let's go. It actually took me some talent to do something. Unbelievable, I know. But yeah, RE7, PT, Alien Isolation, those are some modern examples that also borrowed from it. And I also remember the explosion of indie horror around the time, like I was talking about. The first game I ever watched PewDiePie play was called Slender. And I think later they made a more expanded upon version from a legit studio called Slender the 8 Pages. But the concept of this game, it was literally you just download the executable and it was like a Unity build. And you just are going around in the woods and it just says collect the 8 pages. And you just find these pages, and every time you hit a milestone, like when you hit 2 pages, the music changes, and you hit 4 pages, the music changes again. And then when you hit 6 out of 8, it gets like super crazy, bassy, and just really ominous. And every time it gets tougher and tougher to avoid Slender Man. And that game blew up. For such a simple game, dude, so many people were playing it and getting just millions and millions and millions of views. It turned into a whole ass phenomenon, the Slender Man thing, which originally was a creepypasta. And you know what? Do you guys remember this very classic YouTube channel called Marble Hornets? Which, to my knowledge, was like one of the first. It basically tried to be like a horror documentary type YouTube channel, and it also featured Slender Man. So if you guys have never checked this out, this was a really unique concept at the time. I think it started in 2009, but the way it worked is the introductory episode had the guy talking about how his friend had moved away, but he left all these tapes and he couldn't find his friend anymore. Like they lost contact and he was trying to reach out to them. So he began digging through. I'm about to sneeze. Hang on. My nose sabotaged the stream. Hang on a second. But yeah, basically his friend went away and they lost contact. He tried to reach back out to his friend again and he couldn't find out, where he went, where he had gone. And so he started to dig through these old VHS tapes that he left behind. And every time he would upload an episode, it would just be like tape number 1 or tape number 2, tape number 3. And they were all these kind of really short, self-contained, almost horror movies by themselves, He would say like, oh, the audio was missing from this one. And it would be a shot of him just kind of looking outside and you would just see Slender Man in the distance and then it would cut away really quick, So it was a really unique concept at the time. Why is James standing still while the fog is? He is stupid, but that's beside the point. Yeah, so it was a really unique type of YouTube channel at the time. And it was kind of the beginning of that Slender Man, pop culture explosion. And then the game Slender, when it came out, was just a whole other dimension. And really morbidly, it actually, from what I understand, it actually motivated some girls to commit like a fucking stabbing. Like, it was actually crazy. The amount of hysteria and popularity over this one singular creepypasta thing known as Slenderman was insane. It was like the peak of the cultural zeitgeist, you know what I mean? And, you know, that really did spark a lot of people's careers that are still ongoing nowadays. People like, again, Markiplier, PewDiePie, Jacksepticeye, all these people. And Jacksepticeye is cool because he actually still does cameos in some of the more modern indie horror games, like Fears to Fathom. He was in Puppet Combo's Murder House, which is one of my favorite modern indie horror games. So, and that was just an interesting time on YouTube. It is. It was Adipie. Yeah, Slenderman was one of the biggest, like, trendy things that I remember being a part of on my very, very early days on YouTube. And it really kind of, that and also Amnesia really sparked the whole indie horror interest for a while. And then it kind of just, you know, disappeared as quick as it came because Minecraft took it over. Dude, Minecraft is one of the most long-lasting, culturally relevant games ever fucking made. Like, I remember when Minecraft was in beta and big YouTubers were playing it. How much money? I would love, it would be virtually impossible for somebody to do this, but how much money has Minecraft as a property generated? Not just in sales, but in YouTube revenue, in Twitch ad revenue, in Twitch donation subs bits. Like, it has to be $1 trillion game. Okay, not really, but it's literally got to be the most profitable game of all time for individual people and for the developers and for Notch, the guy that created it, all kinds of other shit. Yeah, it was in beta for a super long time and it was also free. And then when it officially came out, it was just exploded all over again, you know? But anyways, we were also talking a little bit earlier before I started the recording about PlayStation 1 horror games and how they were also... Oh yeah, so another modern example I meant to talk about is the Mortuary Assistant. That would be an example of a walking simulator game, meaning there's no weaponry, there's no weaponry, there's no way to defend yourself really. The only thing you can logically do is just walk around until these scripted events happen and just navigate your way to doing things correctly to get the right endings. So that's what people would describe as a walking simulator. Is it bigger than GTA 5? Because I remember that snagging the bag for most profitable piece of media. I think GTA 5 did win in terms of just sales. You know, like in terms of just this game being on the market and selling units raw, yes, GTA 5 I think is the most profitable ever. But in terms of content creation, also creating a lot of revenue, I mean, maybe GTA 5 is close because of all the role-playing stuff. You could argue that for sure. But, yeah, I think it would be pretty close if you were to really compare the two. It would be a lot of kind of, you know, splitting hairs, and they're pretty close. They've both done an incredible amount of shit in the past 10 years, that's for sure. So yeah, we were talking about the simplicity of PS1 horror games, and a lot of it comes down to the polygon count. So a lot of times when you hear people talk about like the technical aspects of games, they'll say poly count, and what they're referring to there is just the low amount of polygons you use to make up certain textures. And what it ends up doing is it kind of muddies the waters in your brain to where you'll look at a wall that has a simple pattern or something on it, but it can completely look like something else. And a good example is on PS1, the first Silent Hill game, the walls of the school. Whenever you get to the nightmare version of the school, the walls actually look like the demon at the end of the game. Like they have the wings, the shape, the outline, everything. And is that intentional, or is it just a product of the way that the game was constructed? I don't know if it was intentional, but that's something that your brain, you know, is kind of mulling over and figuring out as you play, and it's really cool. Exactly, that concept of pareidolia, which is, you know, your brain is trying to recognize a pattern and it's convincing you of something that may not even be real. It's like cognitive dissonance a little bit too, you know? Tetris, meanwhile, enjoying its #1 spot. Yeah, Tetris is probably the most remade and re-released game of all time. I will definitely say that. It's got to be up there. And, you know, and what's really cool about it is now we live in a time where a lot of third-party developers are trying to recreate the success of PlayStation 1 games and that look and that feel with developers like Puppet Combo, developers like Torture Star Video, making games like Murder House, Rewind or Die, Stay Out of the House, and all these Texas Chainsaw Massacre seemingly influenced games that emulate that feel of the simplistic texture work and UIs and all these things. And I think that's really cool. Hello Neighbor. Yeah, no. Sorry, Hello Neighbor is a very, very close, distant. It's a very distant relative, actually, not a close relative. But yeah, and I do love that feel. In fact, probably my favorite of any of those types of games is Power Drill Massacre. Power Drill Massacre is the most scary modern indie horror game, I would say, because it captures a lot of what made the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre scary. Very simple music, very loud, abrasive interactions between you and the main enemy, the main slasher villain. And it just leaves you with no sense of guidance. You just basically are left to wander around until you're attacked. So there's no chance to relax. You just never know when it's going to happen. The best horror is always what you don't, or to some degree can't understand / fathom. It's why old horror games had the benefit of limited hardware, which enhanced the games. Absolutely. That's beautifully said, Adipie. That is so true. And the funny thing, the interesting part about Silent Hill 1 and 2's relationship and their dynamic is that the fog was created in Silent Hill 1 to mask a really low draw distance. And so naturally, when Silent Hill 2 was coming out, people were like, oh, we're going to be able to see more of the town because there won't need to be as much fog. Well, they went in the totally opposite direction, and they used the PS2's hardware to generate more fog and obscure the town arguably just as much, if not more. So it gives you this really claustrophobic feeling that you can't see, 20, 30 feet in front of you sometimes because the fog is so thick. What could I say about Five Nights at Freddy's being another modern classic? It is, for sure. That was when I started to feel like I was too old for games like that, because that was around 2014 or so. I was around 20 years old. And even at the time, whenever Five Nights at Freddy's first dropped, it felt like something that mainly kids were playing. I mean, that was just the vibe that we got, like me and my whole friend group. That was just the vibe that we got. And so it kind of felt like a horror adjacent version of like Fortnite back then. And that's just how I've always felt about it. Not to insult it or say that it's not good. I mean, obviously it stood the test of time. It's still around. Like, they just put out a movie. It's been its own legitimate franchise and property for almost 10 years. But just for me personally, I never really got too much enjoyment out of it. I love how Silent Hill 2 handles it. Either you enjoy the claustrophobia of a ghost town or the claustrophobia of some spooky ass hallways and corridors. Yeah. And like you talked about with the sound design too, it's so ingenious the way that the sound design alone could carry that game. But it's constructed in a way to where everything is very intentional and nothing feels forced. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways of that era of survival horror, is that everything was very, very intentionally designed. And nothing was by accident. So yeah, on top of that, Puppet Combo, Torture Star Video, all these games attempting to recreate that PS1 feel. On the flip side of that, we have a lot of PlayStation 1 and 2 games that are being remade nowadays. Like the most famous example, obviously, would be the Resident Evil remakes that started with Resident Evil 2. For anybody that doesn't know, Resident Evil was kind of in a rut for a long time. Basically, Resident Evil 5 did well in 2009, but then they put out a side game or two, I think, and then in 2012 they put out Resident Evil 6, which was by far the most poorly received Resident Evil game ever made. It was very Hollywood action. It was very generic Hollywood. Like I've already said Hollywood a million times, but that's the word that immediately comes to mind when I look at Resident Evil 6, is just they tried to make it some kind of Hollywood production with like big Michael Bay explosions and action sequences and crazy set pieces and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It just didn't do very well. The game feels awkward to play. It has all these weird like camera angles that they tried to be cinematic about. And it just had a very poor reception. And it basically killed Resident Evil for about 5 years. They went back to the drawing board because the reception was so poor, and they developed their own engine called the RE engine. And then they came back with the first RE engine game in 2017, Resident Evil 7. And Resident Evil 7 completely reinvigorated that entire franchise. It revived it. It pulled out the fucking defibrillator and revived it. And RE7 became one of the top 2, if not top 3 best-selling games. and it sparked them to want to use this new engine to remake some of their older PlayStation 1 games. So the first one that they did was RE2. And RE2 Remake has an incredibly good reputation as being one of the best games they've ever made. So, there's all these remakes coming out now. And so far we've had Resident Evil 2 Remake. The very next year we had RE3 Remake, which is a very highly criticized game in its own right. And then after that, we had the RE4 Remake. And now there are rumors, there's some leaks and rumors that the next one is actually going to be Code Veronica. And I don't know how credible this leak is. I'm not going to pull it up, but you guys can look at it. You guys can look at it and just see, because I don't want to navigate 4chan if I have to. I know there's probably just screenshots, but still. But basically, there was a guy who took to 4chan, and he claims to be a Japanese QA tester working as a contractor for Capcom. And he says that Capcom presented him with a demo of a Code Veronica remake that is essentially the intro of Code Veronica on Dreamcast or PS2 or Xbox Live Arcade, wherever you're playing it, of Claire kind of running through that umbrella facility and getting cornered at the end before she gets captured and taken to that island. That's basically what the demo is going to be, is what he says. And usually I wouldn't lend too much credence to 4chan leaks because, we've seen in the past that they can be just as bullshit as they are accurate. But there was someone who famously leaked, like I was talking about before we started the episode, there was someone who famously leaked the last Smash Brothers Ultimate character being Sora. And how he knew that was he said he actually worked at Disney in the licensing department, and Nintendo had given them a call and asked to license some music for Smash Ultimate. And he just kind of put two and two together and was like, well, the only reason they would call us for Smash Ultimate would be if they were putting Sora in the game. So he leaked it and it turned out to be true. Always makes me wonder if Nintendo would sick their legal team on that guy, or try to find out who he is. Because it wouldn't be too hard. He would have to be a Disney employee that works in licensing. There can't be too many of those, right? I was wondering whether they do Code Veronica mainly because it's fairly small in length and a fan game, and a fan base. Well, I think that's probably why they would do it, is because Code Veronica is one that they could just kind of get out in maybe a year. Probably a year of turnaround or development time. I just hope that they don't do what they did with RE3 Remake, which is simplifying it, cutting out some of the most iconic set pieces and areas. I hope they don't just reduce it to a 3-hour long game. That would be pretty annoying. Yeah, Code Veronica is actually a fairly long game. If you're doing a casual playthrough for the first time, it'll probably take you 5-6 hours to beat it, if not a little bit longer actually. So, that's kind of where we're at. Of course, there's rumors swirling and a lot of people are talking about Resident Evil 5 Remake, and that certainly might be a thing. But, I don't even really want to get into this conversation on here, but there's a lot of websites and publishers and, a lot of stories being published, not publishers, but a lot of stories being published about how that game is racist. And there's already this controversy machine being spun up around it. So we don't know how soon we're actually going to see that, if ever. But this is kind of history repeating itself, because if you don't know, the original Resident Evil 5 teaser trailer was at, I believe, E3 2007. And it only showed Chris Redfield in Africa. That's all it showed. And just based off the back of that, some journalist at Engadget or something like that, I forget what publication he was actually with, but he made a claim that the game was racist because it was a white guy shooting up a bunch of African people. And that was it. Just based on that alone, he was saying that the game was racist. And then in the next trailer that they dropped, they introduced Sheva as a partner. And a lot of people were like, oh, that's interesting. That they would put an African woman in this game now. Are they trying to curb the racism allegations or whatever? But apparently Sheva was always meant to be in the game. She wasn't an inclusion. They just wanted to keep her a secret and reveal her later on. They didn't want to reveal her with the original teaser trailer. Yeah, I remember that too, Medicine Man. Because back then I used to frequent IGN and GameSpot. Those were those were easily my two most visited websites at the time. I want to see them do RE5 and 6 and then just focus on new games, not gonna lie. Yeah, RE1 already has a perfect remake. It never needs to be done. But yeah, everybody was like, oh, Capcom's trying to curb the racism allegations by putting a black character in the game. That's so scummy. And then, like Medicine Man said, she was always planned to be a part of the story. She was always supposed to be in it. They just didn't want to reveal her right away because that's not how game teasers work. A teaser is just supposed to be a very baseline look. This is the plot. This is what's going to be happening. This is where you're going to be. This is who you're going to play as. And then as you get closer to release, then you start to show more and more things, because when you're in that just drop a teaser trailer phase, there's probably a lot of things with the game that are still changing on the fly, and they may not be as consistent as they're supposed to be when the game is ready to come out. So why would you just show your whole hand if the game's going to be different by the time it comes out, you know? It wasn't that they were being racist or trying to avoid being called racist. They just were saving some of their story elements for later. Despite this controversy BS, gamers will always be gamers and journalists will always be journalists. Yeah. And to that end, that's a perfect way to put it, because clickbait keeps the internet going. As much as I hate clickbait and as much as it annoys the fuck out of me, it keeps YouTube going. It keeps these game journalism websites going. It keeps regular news going. Everything on the internet depends on tricking people into clicking on your article to get either ad revenue or to get you to sign up for a fucking newsletter or to get you to pay a monthly subscription to do this, that, or the other bullshit. That's what it comes down to. And YouTube is the same way. Like, people got on my case because a video that I uploaded said, "Did Silent Hill 2 ruin Silent Hill?" Yes, I could have phrased that in a way that's not as clickbaity, but listen, don't hate the player, hate the fucking game. The way that you have to garner views for your video is you do have to clickbait a little bit. Like, yeah, I could have easily said, "Did Konami's mishandling of Silent Hill ruin Silent Hill?" But like, what a stupid title that is, you know? That doesn't really get your attention. That statement in and of itself is just factual. But some people got on my case about like, "Oh, clickbait. I'm just going to answer no, and I'm not going to watch the rest of the video." Left a dislike. Like, what? Some people actually commented, "Left a dislike. No, it did not ruin it. Not watching the rest of the video. Clickbait." Okay. Yeah, the Cuphead journalist who ran left and right and struggled for like a solid 15 minutes and wasn't able to do a simple double jump dash. And then there was also footage of that same journalist playing Doom Eternal, and it was equally cringy. Like they could it's like they could barely move the analog sticks on their controller. They were just slowly moving left and right. They were missing every jump. They didn't know how to fire their gun. And look, I'm not going to get on their case because I don't expect game journalists to be like fucking MLG, pinpoint precision people. But it's like, if you're not even competent with video games enough to play a simple 2D side scroller with jumping and dashing, I mean, how qualified are you really to comment on the quality of the game? I'm not touching that out of pie with a 50-foot pole, but that is a comment, and it did appear in my chat room. That's all I'm going to say about it. But yeah, it's like, how qualified are you really to talk about the construction of the game if you can't even complete the tutorial? You know, and there was a lot of arguments going on about that on Twitter. Which, by the way, Twitter is a plague, and you can avoid, here's a cheat code. If you guys want to avoid 90% of the internet's toxicity, the arguments, the mudslinging, anything, just stay off Twitter. Your life on the internet will be so much easier if you just stay off Twitter. I refuse to call it X, but you guys get the idea. Exactly, yes. I would need to get Dr. Red in here to give me some advice on whether or not I should comment on that little chat message. Anyways, can't imagine how overtime marketing must be working these days in gaming when you can be leaked for a decade to come, like with Insomniac. Yeah, data leaks are huge. I mean, remember when Sony got hacked majorly in like 2011, and their whole service had to be down for over a month. It was down for like 36 days from what I remember. And that was crazy. Like, they had such a bad data leak, and all customer like credit card info got dumped and leaked to the internet, and so everybody had to like get a settlement. And I remember we got my family personally, because me, my brother, and my dad, all three had accounts with credit cards attached. They ended up giving us like a $50 PSN card to make up for it. So just imagine, we were one family. Imagine the millions and millions of users that were affected. That must have been an extremely costly thing for Sony. There was a Twitter here. It's gone now. Yeah, it's gone in my mind. That's for sure. But that's going to be interesting. You know, in the coming years, we're going to be seeing a lot more. Unfortunately, we're going to be seeing a lot more remakes, like Silent Hill 2 remake. I've kind of refrained from talking about it because I have a video coming out about it. But the atmosphere and the state of the subreddit right now is everybody pointing fingers at each other and being pissed off that we're not excited about it. And I say we because I'm not necessarily excited about it. I have a lot of concerns. I don't know if it's going to be good, and I don't know if it's going to be shit. And when you say that, people are like, what? You're not just overly hype and excited for this game. Why not? It's like, well, if you've been in the community longer than 10 years like I have, I've been in the Silent Hill community for 18 fucking years. I started watching clips of the games in 2006, and I played the games a whole year before that, 2 and 3 and 4. I waited a lot longer to play 1 because I didn't have a copy of it, but I didn't get to play 1 for the first time until about 2011 when I was able to download it off of PSN. But anyways, yeah, what's new? But people just have this mentality of, why are you not overly excited and just ready to throw your money at anything that has Silent Hill on it? And I'm like, guys, I was here for the 2012 nonsense of all them having to do was re-release Silent Hill 2 and 3 as decent HD collection alternatives so that we could play them on our modern systems, and they failed at that so miserably that people are still talking about how shit it is to this day. Still. I mean, that's a catastrophic failure if people are still talking about a simple HD collection being botched that hard. And, you know, to that end, Silent Hill Downpour came out that month as well, and it was also garbage. And then Book of Memories came out later that year, and it was even more garbage somehow. So, you know, they really, in every possible way, botched Silent Hill. And for me to look back just 10 to 12 years and see that and be like, why am I supposed to now all of a sudden trust Konami's decision making when it comes to this franchise when they've proven that they don't know a fucking thing about it? I mean, they've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt they don't know anything about it. So I can only hope that Bloober's collaboration with Ito and Akira Yamaoka ends up becoming something that we can be proud to play, but I can't know that for sure. So why am I going to sit here and get excited about it? You know, healthy skepticism is very important in this scenario. Stamp, we have to remember, if we ever want Silent Hill 1 and 3 remake, we must purchase this. Well, that's what I've said, Adipie. Look here, like they do pachinko slots, I too can gamble on their games. Exactly. Yeah, I don't have to bet it on Silent Hill 2 remake, but I'm going to. And you might say, oh, you're a consumer, you're hypocritical, you're cringe, this, that, or the other. I'm going to support Silent Hill 2 remake because, like Kendo said, it is our only logical path to eventually getting a Silent Hill 1 or 3 remake, or 4, which I really do want to see. 1 especially deserves a remake. I can play Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition. I can play Silent Hill 3. I can play Silent Hill 4 in multiple ways, but I think that 1 out of all of them deserves a modern remake of some kind. Just so it can be more, you know, approachable for younger people. Because I have seen so many younger people try to play Silent Hill 1 and they're like, oh, the graphics are really bad and there's delay in the movement and it feels really bad to play. And they just can't really get into it. So I think it deserves a modern treatment more than any others, and I'm still kind of baffled by their decision to just immediately go to Silent Hill 2. I guess I shouldn't be. Yeah, absolutely. I would take it if it was just a remaster. Like, just fix the controls, give us slightly better models and everything. Like, it doesn't even need to be a full-on rebuild in, like, some kind of modern engine, like Unreal or something. Just remaster it, fix the quality of life stuff, and that's all we would need. Honestly, I thought the first trailer was really strong. It actually gave me hope despite, well, Bloober plus the Ito and Yamaoka interviews, but the recent footage is definitely a downer. And then, yeah, exactly like you said, Adipie, now we have Bloober pointing fingers at Konami, being like, hey, it's not our fault the trailer sucked, and gave off the vibe that it's like an action-y Resident Evil remake style game. It's Konami's fault. And so already, just like back in 2012, the company that was responsible for making the HD collection was pointing fingers at Konami saying, hey, we wanted to do it right and they didn't let us. And then Konami was like, that's not true. They failed. And, there's a lot of back and forth. Now Bloober is arguing with Konami. And it's like, dude, you can't argue with the company that gave you this opportunity because they could decide to drop you tomorrow. I wouldn't even say they're arguing, but it was interesting that they would blame Konami for this. Okay, first of all, who constructed a game that such a trailer could even be made from? Bloober? I think it was you. So how are you blameless in this, You are to blame for this, at least somewhat. You can't just say it wasn't our fault, Bloober's like the lazy brat and Konami's the parent who doesn't really give a shit about the kid as long as they're getting some food in. True. Bloober quietly wiping their bums. Yeah. Well, we'll see. I hope that this is just a temporary thing. And, Bloober's already done some weird things. Like they were saying, oh, the game is already, really far along. And everybody's like, oh shit, release date soon. And then they had to release another statement to clarify, well, we didn't mean that it's ready to be shipped, and that all that information is going to come from Konami. So don't look to us for any of that info, It's like, well, then why would you say that? So they've already made some questionable decisions as far as what they want to talk about and timelines, and now we have this whole trailer debacle. So I really hope that the next trailer can kind of clear things up a little bit, but I have a feeling we're going to be getting a release date very, very soon. So yeah, with that being said, that kind of covers, most of the preset topics that I had, but did you guys have any questions for me before we, wrap this up? The fact that they didn't even repost the trailer on their Twitter accounts. Yeah, I know. Like imagine working at Bloober and you see this trailer came out and you're just like, fuck, this makes us look so bad. They didn't even repost it, like you said. So I really hope this is not a sign of friction between them and Konami. Because if it is, then that's just gonna spell some really, really bad news for the remake when it does come out. But we need to understand there are still 2 other games coming out, Silent Hill F and Silent Hill Townfall. Townfall is most likely going to be a sort of walking simulator type thing, at least based on what Annapurna has done in the past. And then F is going to be, we don't even know. I mean, for all we know, F could be a fucking visual novel. Like we have no idea what that is. So just, Silent Hill 2 Remake is obviously the main thing. And then there's also the movie. Don't forget that. What would sell you proper on this remake? What would you need to see from the game that would satisfy you? I would need to see every character. I would need to see Eddie. I would need to see Angela. I'd need to see Laura. And I would need to see some dialogue between them before I could make a logical conclusion about whether or not I want to buy the game. I would have to see all the characters, listen to their voices, and hear the way that they communicate with each other. That's going to be my biggest one. Because ultimately the game is not about, just James's story. It's about the way that all the stories are interwoven and how they interact with each other throughout. So I need to see all the characters. I need to see how they look, how they act, and how they speak. And that would be what would sell me on it. But like I said, I'm going consumer mode and I'm going to buy it no matter what because it's too interesting. And you know what? Being in the position that I am and streaming Silent Hill as often as I do, I just want something new, for God's sake. I want something new to play. So I'm not going to sit here with my arms folded and go back and play Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition again when there's something new and interesting to play. I want to at least give it a shot. Because God knows I've played the original games enough, and I want something new. I love the F trailer. There's some stunning art choices in there, and I did enjoy what the studio pulled off with the RE multiplayer game, so I have hope. Yeah. It could very well be great. Like, what if F turns out to be the dark horse and it's like by far the best of the new batch of stuff? What if the new movie turns out to be awesome? I'm excited to go watch the movie as well. I'll say it. We'll round up some friends and go watch the movie. That would be fun. We could do a watch party in the Discord soon after it comes out. There's a lot of things we can do. But with that being said, Japanese schoolgirls will always save the horror scene. Where's the lie? With that being said, I hope everybody enjoyed this episode of Stamp of Approval. We're going to wrap things up and roll into the next segment of the live stream tonight. So I will be uploading this on YouTube. If anybody wants to join the Discord, I'm going to post the link to it here, but it's also going to be down into the description. The next couple weeks, we should have a guest on. So anybody watching this on YouTube, there will be a couple more streamer friends on the next couple times. If you ever want to check it out live, Again, my Twitch channel will be linked down in the description. And with that being said, everybody have a great rest of your day. And we'll be back with the most Scuffed podcast. I'm going to start saying that again. We'll be back with the most Scuffed podcast next week, same time, Wednesday night. Goodbye.